Hey guys, this week we are starting into Unit 3 of our World History course. Unit 3 covers all the way from European exploration through across the world, all the way up into the start and establishment of major colonies around the world, not only here in the Americas, but also throughout Asia. So, leading up to this point, what do we know is going on? So, we need some context. Well, up to this point, we've seen some of Asian nations really develop and grow. Okay, so we saw the start of exploration, the connection between different empires for the purpose of better understanding, education, trading of science and history, all of those things. Okay, so we see the world starting to become interconnected, especially throughout Europe, the Middle East, and into Asia. We know that we have the Silk Road, which is connecting again major parts of the world up to this point. We've seen silk, spices, ivory, metalworking, people traded along the Silk Road, along with ideas and diseases that have traveled across the world now at this point. In the Middle East, where we took a look at the Muslim Golden Age. Okay, so we started to see the rise of the Ottoman Empire, where we see a strong preference for education, universities, just trying to figure out the world. And a lot of this knowledge traveled back to Asia and into Europe. Okay, previously to this, we saw that Europe was kind of in a state of decline. They were dealing primarily with the Black Plague or the Black Death during our last unit, and because of this, we didn't see much really developing out of Europe. Well, near the end of the 1300s into the 1400s, Europe does enter into a period called the Renaissance. And during the Renaissance, we see this reemergence of art, architecture, education, discovery, okay, the wanting to be better. And that's very typical of humans. When we have a period where we're forced to kind of isolate, once we start to emerge, usually you're going to see a lot of growth come out of that time period. So, out of the Renaissance that happened in Europe, we have what's called European exploration, where humans are just ready to explore, find new ways of doing things, and new places to live. So that gets us into where we're starting at for our unit, which is European exploration. So, during the Renaissance, we see a lot of different ideas being introduced to Europeans, such as luxury goods, right, that were traded along the Silk Roads, and this idea of how can we get more luxury goods quicker in order to trade and then make more money. If you find new trading routes, you're going to be able to get these goods faster, meaning you're going to make more money. Okay, so that was a big goal of Europeans during this time, which led to that motivation of let's find new sailing routes. Okay, so originally, a lot of Europeans believed that the quickest way to travel was going to be by ocean, okay, by sailing, and that would be faster than traveling across land, where you may run into the geography, okay, so mountains, terrain, weather, and you may run out of resources. So the belief was that if you sail around Africa to connect Europe to different parts of Asia, you're going to have a faster trade route. So many times when we take a look at the coming out of the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, getting into this age of exploration during the 1300s, 1400s, there are a couple different areas of Africa that end up becoming what we say colonized by Europeans. Again, these were these different routes of traveling around Africa in order to get goods for making that money. Now, when you're sailing, you have to make pit stops every once in a while, either to re-up on goods or in order to stop and get more resources for you and your crew. So, if you see here in this image, we've got these red spots. Okay, those were big ports, trading areas where Europeans were stopping along that way as they were trying to sail around the coast of Africa, trying to get that faster trading route into Asia. Okay, so taking a look at Portugal specifically, Portugal really did a lot of that colonization, having these ports in order for trading, whether it's with the natives or other Europeans. Okay, so the hope not only was to trade, but then also spread influence into the native tribes. So the belief was that you could convert people to Christianity, you would find riches in whatever resources were available along the ports, and again, finding that easier trade route. Okay, one of our first European explorers is Vasco da Gama. Okay, he was a very prominently known Portuguese explorer, and he is the first one who was able to make that oceanic trade contact with India. Okay, coming out of India, that's where we get a lot of our spices, and spices were highly valued back in Europe. Again, a lot of money is going to be made trying to increase the amount of spices that are coming back into Europe because they're highly valued. So this is where we start to see more European countries getting involved with this idea of faster trade routes in order to make more money. This is where we enter in Christopher Columbus. Now this is a name obviously that most people know coming into world history. We have a holiday here in the United States for it, celebrating Christopher Columbus. So who was this guy and what does he have to do with world history? He was actually Italian. Okay, he was an Italian navigator, and he tried to go around to different European countries and petition or to try to convince rulers to donate money to him so that way he could then fund a fleet of ships that could travel around the world in order to find better trading routes. Again, better trading routes, more goods, more money. So a lot of rulers at first were thinking, no, we're not going to invest in this exploration. We're okay with what we've got going on. They didn't know him. They didn't trust him. So handing out money like this was sometimes a huge risk. So eventually, Christopher Columbus ends up going to the Spanish crown, which at this time is King Ferdinand and his wife Isabella, and they end up agreeing because they're just so rich during this time. They end up agreeing, yeah, we'll throw some money your way. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, no losses really to us. Okay? But they finally agreed to allowing to fund Christopher Columbus's voyage because they wanted to increase their authority. Okay, so the more different little colonies, ports that you have around the world, the bigger your empire is going to be, the bigger your influence. And they really hoped to strengthen the religion of Catholicism, which is a branch underneath Christianity. Okay? So, again, the crown is just trying to spread their influence. If you're able to make a new trade route and sail around the world, that's great, that's awesome, but really, the goal was to increase Christianity, Catholicism around the world. So, Christopher Columbus sets out with 3 different ships. Okay, the one that he sailed on primarily was the Santa Maria, and he sailed the seas of the Atlantic Ocean, believing that if he continued west, that he would eventually hit India, not knowing that there was an entire continent in his way. So when Christopher Columbus and his 3 ships ended up seeing land for the first time, he truly believed that he had reached India, and he believed that he had reached the islands off of India. And so he called the islands the West Indies, again, believing that he has found the source of spices, and he was so convinced that he actually went back to Spain still believing that he had reached India. So when Christopher Columbus reaches this island, okay, this is now what we know as the Bahamian Islands, and he discovers that there are natives, there are people who are already living there. And when he reaches the tribe, the native tribe that's living there, he finds there are great resources, not only in the vegetation, but also in the fact that the natives that he was interacting with had different pieces of gold jewelry that was adorning either their face or their body. And again, gold is very valuable, something that was highly prized along the Silk Road. And so Christopher Columbus saw these natives as being able to give him riches. Okay? So not only was he interested in these resources, but he was interested in the people as resources as well. Again, trying to spread Christianity, such as the same goal as the Spanish crown, as well as he had written in his own personal diary that upon meeting the native people, he believed that they would make good servants. Okay, so Christopher Columbus ended up taking 3 of the natives back to Spain with him in order to show the crown, hey, look what I found. Okay, so here's what I found. Please continue to pay for this voyage back and forth, and shared his new discoveries with the Spanish crown. So because of Christopher Columbus going back to the Spanish crown, they did end up appointing him as governor of this new Spanish colony, where they declared that the land was Spanish land and that he was in charge of the decision making, again, for mining out any resources, whether that be gold, the people, vegetation, and that those resources would then, he would get a piece of that money, and he would send that stuff back to Europe to later be sold as well. Eventually, though, Christopher Columbus's relations with the Taínos people, who were the natives, ended up turning sour. Okay, it turned sour, one, because the Taínos people did not respect Christianity. They didn't know anything about this religion, and so they didn't respect many of the symbols that the Spanish tried to influence them with, such as the cross. Okay, so when the Taínos people showed no respect for the cross, that ended up upsetting the Spanish explorers, kind of putting a rift between the two parties. Christopher Columbus also used the natives, again, as people who would try to mine out their resources in order to sell. He was known for being abusive not only to other Spanish who came to the region, but also to the natives. So again, that relationship there between the Spanish and the natives just completely fell apart. But because of his stories that spread around Europe, we see this increase of European exploration. It spurred interest among different kingdoms in order to spread influence, money, things like that. And so we see an increase of what we call Spanish conquistadors. And Spanish conquistadors are different explorers, different conquerors who arrived in America again to make money or to spread that Christianity belief. One of our Spanish conquistadors that goes down in history is Hernan Cortez. Hernan Cortez was known for having a huge rift with the Aztec Empire. Okay, so originally he did form alliances with the native empire that was there. Okay, and how he did this was by forming bonds with neighboring tribes who had been at warfare against the Aztec Empire for a long time. So the Spanish were able to fund this other side of the battling peoples, and he was able to then go into the Aztec Emperor, or go to the empire, and easily vanquish and have conquest over the very ancient empire that had been around for a long time in the Americas. When he first came into contact with the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma, he sent them gifts. Okay, Moctezuma sent Hernan Cortez gifts believing that they were gods, right? They had never met people that looked like this before. They were myths. And so believing that Hernan Cortez was a god, he sent them gifts. And he tried to please them, tried to keep them out of his empire with these gifts, but it just didn't work. Again, because Hernan Cortez had made these different bonds and relationships with warring tribes as neighbors. Okay, so Hernan Cortez ends up forcing Moctezuma, who again is the emperor of the Aztec people, to sign over his land and any treasures to the Spanish. Okay, and so that's where we start to see this major decline of one of the greatest empires of peoples in ancient history. Okay, so more and more Spanish conquistadors started to arrive, and as more of these Europeans started to come in asking for things, it caused a lot of confusion of who do you trust, whose whose rulings, whose decisions, whose requests do you have to follow? What if I follow this person's and not another? Am I going to get killed? And so there was just so much confusion among the Aztec Empire of who to trust. And so eventually, in 1521 AD, the Spanish end up destroying Tenochtitlan, which is now what we know as Mexico City. And not only was there warfare like hand-to-hand combat and weaponry taking place in order for this destruction to occur, but there was also major diseases that were being traded between the Europeans and the African natives of the Aztec tribe. Now, smallpox, the big reason that it destroyed such a great empire is because the Aztec peoples didn't have an immune system built up against this specific disease. And so as a result, their bodies weren't able to fight it off as well as, say, a European, where their bodies had been adapting to this virus long over many centuries of time. So a disease was coming in during the same time as warfare, and it completely wiped out one of the greatest greatest Aztec empires to ever be in the Americas. Okay, so here on the right, you can see an image of what smallpox kind of looks like. Okay, so you have these small pustule boils that form all over your body, and they do end up scarring you for life. Okay, at this point, smallpox has been eradicated, so you don't have to worry about getting this disease anymore. But just know that it did wipe out a lot of the the native empires here in the Americas. So we are going to stop here for today. Okay, if you have any questions, please reach out. I'm happy to help go over or explain some of these concepts again. But again, some of those big things to know: Europeans originally started to explore in order to get access to more spices. As you're exploring, you're getting the goods, you're making more money, and you're having influence in order to spread the religion of the time, which was Christianity. So those were the big incentives for traveling around. Once Europeans made contact with the Americas, they ended up destroying some of those neighboring and native empires to the point where they are not in existence anymore. Okay, let me know if you guys have any questions. Hope to hear from you soon.